Welcome to Chapter 7. Everything we've built since Chapter 1 has been static. The file the server sends is exactly the file we saved, no matter who's looking at it or when. That changes today. PHP is the first language in this course that runs on the server instead of in the browser, and that one difference opens up everything else this semester. Pages that look different depending on what a visitor clicked, and forms that actually go somewhere when submitted. By the end of this chapter, you'll have built both a light/dark toggle powered by nothing but a link and some PHP, and a real processing page behind your own Chapter 6 form that saves submissions to a file and emails you a copy. Quick recap before we move forward. Chapters 1 and 2 covered how requests work and how to plan and structure a page semantically. Chapters 3 through 5 were CSS layout, color and content, responsive design. Chapter 6 gave us tables and forms. Notice the gap in Chapter 6. The form had fields, a method, and an action attribute, but that action pointed nowhere. There was nothing on the other end. Every page we've rendered so far has been the same file for every visitor, every time. Chapter 7 breaks that pattern. Starting today, the server gets to decide what it sends back. Let's define the term we've been building toward. A static page, in the strict sense, is one where the file the server hands back is exactly the file that was saved to disk. Nothing changes it in between. PHP breaks that relationship because it runs on the server before the page ever leaves it. By the time HTML reaches the browser, the PHP that generated it is already gone. There's no PHP left in the response at all, only the HTML, CSS, and content it produced. Prove this to students live if you can. Open view source on a PHP page. They will never see PHP code there, no matter how much PHP ran, only the HTML that PHP decided to output. That's the whole chapter in one sentence. PHP decides what HTML to send, and only the result ever reaches the browser. Tie this back to Chapter 1's requa. PHP doesn't live in its own file format the way students might expect. It lives directly inside HTML, marked off by less than, PHP and greater than tags. Everything between those tags runs on the server. Everything outside them is ordinary HTML, identical to every page we've built all semester. Emphasize that a single file can freely mix the two, going back and forth between HTML and PHP blocks as many times as the page needs. One requirement makes all of this work. The file must be saved with a .php extension, not .html. That extension is what tells the server to run the file through its PHP interpreter before sending anything back. Save PHP code as HTML, and the server has no reason to process it. Visitors will see the raw less than, PHP, greater than tag sitting unprocessed right on the page. The single most common thing PHP does is print something to the page, and the key word is echo, PHP's version of putting words on screen. PHP variables start with a $sign, $name, $course, and there's no separate declaration step. You assign a value, and the variable exists. Call out the string concatenation operator specifically. PHP joins strings together with a period, not a plus sign like some other languages. Get students reading a line like welcome, $name, as three separate pieces glued together. A string, a variable, and another string. This trips people up coming from JavaScript, so slow down here. Good news for this slide. PHP's if/else works exactly the same way the JavaScript if/else from Chapter 6 did. Same shape, same logic, just a different language wrapped around it. Comparisons use equals to check equality, and equals for not equal. Worth being deliberate about the distinction between a single equals, assignment, and a double equals comparison. Mixing the two up is one of the most common small bugs in any language that uses this syntax, PHP included. Reassure students here. If/else, echo, and variables are the only three building blocks. Section 7. 5's dynamic page needs. No new syntax is waiting in the next section, just these three, combined. This is the payoff slide. Everything so far comes together into something a visitor can actually click and see change. Walk through it as a link sends a value. PHP reads that value and decides what to do with it, and the page changes appearance based on that decision, all before it ever reaches the browser. Start with the link. href equals mode equals dark, appends mode equals dark onto the URL. PHP reads values appended to the URL using the $_get superglobal, so $_get mode holds whatever was typed after mode equals in the address bar. Slow down on the first line of code. $mode equals $_get mode. Light. The is a shorthand. If $_get mode doesn't exist at all, which is exactly what happens the very first time someone visits with nothing appended to the URL, $mode falls back to light instead of throwy. The dark mode toggle used $_get to catch one value from one click. A form works on the exact same underlying idea, PHP reading data that arrived with the request, just with many fields arriving at once instead of one. This is the moment Chapter 6's form finally matters. Its action and method attributes have pointed at a file that didn't exist until now. From here forward, that file is something students build themselves. Draw the distinction clearly. $_get reads data appended to the URL, visible, bookmarkable, exactly what powered the toggle. $_pst reads data sent in the request body instead, invisible in the URL, and the right choice anytime a form is involved, especially anything even slightly sensitive. Point out the connection between the two files on screen. The name equals username. Rather than reopening the Chapter 6 form right away, we build a small new example from scratch, name, email, and comment, to walk through validation, file saving, and email without the complexity of a form built for a different purpose. Submitting this form sends its 3 fields to submit.php, which reads them with $_post, exactly the way the last slide described. Everything for the rest of the chapter builds directly on top of this one small form, so make sure students have it typed and working before moving on. Remind students what Chapter 6 already gave them: HTML5 attributes like required, and JavaScript validation before submit. Both of those run in the browser, which means both can be bypassed. A visitor can disable JavaScript or submit straight to the processing page without ever touching the actual form. Server-side validation is the layer that can't be skipped, because it runs after the data has already arrived at the server. There's no way around it, no matter how the request got there. PHP's empty function checks whether a value is blank, which is exactly what's needed before doing anything else with submitted data. Don't skip the exit line when walking through the code. Without it, the script prints its error message and then keeps running the rest of the page anyway. Exit stops. With validated data in hand, the next question is where it actually goes. File_put_contents writes data directly to a file on the server. No database, no external tool, just a function call. The file_append flag is doing all the important work in that second line. Without it, file_put_contents overwrites the entire file every time it runs, leaving only the most recent submission. With it, each new submission becomes a new line, added to whatever's already there. Practical warning worth saying out loud: the file needs write permission on the server, or this fails silently. No error message, just a file that never gets created or never grows. Frame the text file as a simple stand-in for what Chapter 10's database will eventually do properly. For now, it's a real, working way to keep AR. PHP's built-in mail function sends an email directly from server-side code. No external library or service required. It takes exactly 3 required pieces: who the email goes to, the subject line, and the message body. Flag the important caveat clearly. Mail only actually sends anything if the server itself is configured to send mail. Correct syntax alone doesn't guarantee delivery. This is something to test directly rather than assume is working just because the code looks right. Good moment to mention DreamHost's mail configuration if students want to test this on their own subdomains. Every technique from this chapter, catching data with $_post, validating it, saving it to a file, emailing a copy, applies just as well to the form students already built back in Chapter 6 as it does to the fresh feedback form example. The only thing that changes is which form all of it points at. Take the Chapter 6 form's action attribute, point it at a real .php file for the first time all semester, and apply this chapter's techniques directly. This isn't a new skill waiting to be learned. It's the exact same skill from the last several sections, applied to their own live work instead of a fresh example. Make sure students hear this clearly. This is exactly what Assignment 2 asks them to do. Not a stretch goal anymore, the real deliverable. Step back and look at everything this chapter actually accomplished. 3 different examples, 3 different outcomes, but underneath, all 3 are the same idea wearing different clothes. Toggling a style sheet changed how the page looked, on the fly, based on a single clicked link. Writing to a file saved data somewhere that persists between visits, instead of vanishing the moment the page finished loading. Sending an email reacted to a submission in real time, the instant it happened. Every one of these is PHP reacting to something a user did, and deciding what to send back before the response ever left the server. The plain text file was always described as a stand-in, and that's exactly what it is. Chapter 10 is where that same data finally lands somewhere built to actually hold it. Use this slide as the bridge moment before the recap. Static and dynamic sitting side by side one more time. Everything on the static side is what students walked in with. Everything on the dynamic side is new as of today. This is a good spot to pause and take questions before the formal recap and assignment slide, since it's a visual summary rather than new content. Chapter 7 Recap. PHP runs on the server before HTML ever reaches the browser. Echo, variables, and if-else are the core building blocks. Nothing more was needed to build a real dynamic page. $_get drove the dynamic light/dark toggle. $_post catches real form data. Validation, file saving, and mail are 3 different ways PHP can react to a submission. 2 assignments this chapter. Assignment 1 is the light/dark toggle from Section 7.5. Assignment 2 is wiring their own Chapter 6 form to save submissions and send an email, the stretch goal from Section 7.11. Now the real deliverable. Remind students the quiz covers PHP embedding, variables, conditionals, $_get, /$post, file saving, and mail. Up next, Chapter 8, JavaScript and CSS animations in depth.